I don't know if you know this about me, but I love basketball. I was never picked number one, but that didn't stop me being drawn into the game. You could have asked me when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, it didn't matter. If you had asked me what my favorite sport was, I would have said basketball each and every time. And now that I've gotten a wee bit older, I've had the joy of being able to coach future basketball players. A big shout out to the boys' 5th and 6th grade team at Trinity this year. Hi, my name is Pastor Adam, and I'm a pastor at Trinity, and it's a joy to serve you. We're in the second week of a sermon series, a teaching series that we're calling Game Over. And this series nails home this point. The ironic fact that in order to survive this life, we need to die to this life. Now that concept of death and dying, it's a taboo topic of the world, right? Not often does somebody come up to you in the street and say, "Hey, how's dying going?" So we thought, who better to talk about this concept of death and dying than somebody who does it for a living, a funeral director. So this week we sat down with somebody who calls Trinity home. Rick Stein, the owner and funeral director of Taylor & Stein Funeral Home Services right here in Merrill, to get his take on death and dying. Take a look at our conversation.
I just want to ask you, how has your faith equipped you for working with people often at the worst times of their life?
Well, considering that I'm a graduate of Trinity School, okay, so I learned early in my life how important faith is. And one of the things that I do with a Christian family is I remind them of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and we talk about the many emotions that they'll experience during the funeral. And I remind them it's okay as a Christian to mourn, but it's also okay to laugh. And there's a fine line. This isn't a comedy, but good memories through faith stimulate laughter, and that's therapeutic.
Wherein is your satisfaction in working as a funeral director? Because a lot of people could never do what you do.
There's a lot of jobs that I couldn't do, okay? Where I find satisfaction as funeral service is, first of all, serving families. Because they're letting me in their lives very intimately for maybe 3 to 5 to 7 days, and that helps establish a lifelong relationship. What I also find very satisfying in this job is when I work with particularly a Christian family, and they have that hope. They grieve as humans, but they have hope as Christians.
What would be something that you would like to have your brothers and sisters here at Trinity know before they lose that loved one?
I can tell you this through not only professional but personal experience. Keep the faith, because it will endure for you when you suffer a loss. So that's the biggest thing right there. Keep the faith.
Thank you. And then one more final question is, as Christians, we look forward to the resurrection. We know that the bodies that we place into the ground or into the urn will one day be raised up. How does that affect the way that you treat somebody when you pick up a body from a house?
We're taught as Christians that we are children of God. And as a funeral director, in any situation, what I have done personally for the last 45 and a half years is I make very sure that I treat that body with respect and dignity.
Well, thank you, Rick, and I really do appreciate you taking this time out. And
thank you.
Even more, I appreciate you sharing your faith and how that impacts what you do today.
Thank you very much.
As followers of Jesus, death and dying looks a little bit different for us than it does the world. You know, for a follower of Jesus, death does not start at the end of life. No, one could say that death is really the way of life for a Christian. Let me explain myself a little bit. Just last week, I was talking to my oldest son. He's 3.5 years old, and I don't exactly remember what happened. But I will forever remember the words that he said to me. Something happened that he did something that he was not supposed to do. So I was talking him through maybe what would have been the better option, the better choice in that circumstance. And he looked at me, he said, "Dad, I know, but doing the right thing is so hard." Now, if a 3.5-year-old knows that fact, if a 3.5-year-old can utter that fact and knows enough that doing the right thing is hard, I think that that's a concept that isn't so foreign to you and I as well. I think you and I also could say those words that yeah, I know what the right thing to do is, but sometimes doing it is so hard. We feel this tug of war, this back and forth inside of us. We know what we should do, but we don't want to do it. There's somebody else who talked about this tug of war inside of us. It was this guy named Paul. Now, Paul was a famous church planner in the New Testament, and Paul was really open about his struggle with sin. When was the last time that you were open with somebody about your struggle with sin? Here's what Paul said. Paul says this in Romans 7. "For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing." Now these words, they're deep, right? These words, Paul opens up to his struggle with sin. These words are deeply personal to Paul. But you see, Paul isn't just describing the tug of emotion back and forth of knowing what the right thing to do is, but maybe not having the will to carry it out. No, Paul's describing the Christian life. Paul is describing the life of a follower of Jesus. He's describing your life. And like we said, if a 3.5-year-old knows this struggle, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's a universal problem. So if it's a universal problem, certainly somebody has come up with a universal solution for it. Or maybe not a solution, but something to curb the desire, or maybe to curb the problem altogether. In fact, there is somebody that came up with solution, wise words, wise thoughts in this desire to do good. It's actually Paul himself, that famous church planter. He tells us elsewhere in Scripture, and he references athletics, maybe even basketball, as a way that we can live this Christian life as followers of Jesus. Here's what Paul said. "Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we, that is, we as followers of Jesus, we an imperishable wreath. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air." We could say that we don't shoot threes just to shoot them. "But I discipline my body and keep it under control." Paul, again, opening up with his struggle to sin, tells us kind of what he does when the urge comes, that he knows what to do, but he doesn't want to carry it out. And he uses the metaphor of sports, right? He gets at the very core principle of athletics and basketball. Both, the very core of basketball is Training, practice, right? It is training. We train our right hand. We train our left hand. We train for the follow through. We train to hit free throw after free throw. Who's the best basketball player of all time? Some say MJ, some say LeBron, some say Kobe, some say Pastor Adam. Okay, nobody really ever says that. But have you seen my jump shot? ESPN just got done airing this wonderful TV show just this past week. 1 week ago from today that they called The Last Dance. And this show focused on Michael Jordan's last season as a Chicago Bull. Now, I don't know if you were able to catch this show, but if you were able to watch any of it, even just a little bit, here's what you noticed, is that Michael Jordan trained to be the best in the world. His work ethic, his practice, he trained to be the best. And this is what Paul is saying to us. Is that we need to train our bodies, not for basketball, but we need to train our bodies to serve our neighbor. That is, that we don't need to look inward to ourselves. We need to look outward to others. And if you lived on this earth for any amount of time, even 3.5 years, you know that it takes training to stop looking inward and start looking outward. Do you remember that we started this whole message with a conversation about death and dying? And we said that this is a taboo topic, but we said that we know as followers of Jesus that death doesn't start just at the end of life. It's a way of life. And training, this is where death for the Christian, this is where it comes in. Because we're trained a little differently than the world. Because the world says that you need to train for yourself. Because you are all that matters. What matters is your wants, your needs, your desires, what makes you happy. The world would say this, that if you're tired early in the morning when your children get up, if you're tired, what you should do is just act like you're sleeping so that your spouse will have to get up with them. Because you need that rest. No, better yet, you deserve that rest because your day is more hectic than your spouse's. A coworker walks into your office and all they want to do is tell you about how great their weekend was. But the only thing that you're thinking that's swirling around in your mind is the deadlines coming up. So you let them talk, but you pay no attention to them because what matters most to you is not what matters to them. Maybe for you, your political ideology, which you allow to define your words and your actions, your political ideology says that masks are silly. So just to spurn everybody else who thinks that they're necessary, every time you go get groceries, you make sure that you don't wear one because you don't think that it's important to yourself. Or maybe you're in the other boat and your political ideology, which you allow to define your words and your actions, you think that masks are necessary. And every time that somebody is out in public not wearing a mask, you think to yourself, what an uneducated bonehead. Because what they think doesn't match up to what you think. You see, as followers of Jesus, we're trained a little bit differently than the world. Where the world says you need to live for yourself, right? Live for yourself because you only get one life. Where the world says live to yourself, a follower of Jesus says we need to die to ourselves. And that is a daily process. We need to die to our wants, to our desires, to our needs, to our very own ambitions. And we are to live for our neighbor. Now, we don't die to ourselves in order to earn salvation. We don't die to ourselves to get in a better standing with Jesus. No, we die to ourselves because in death we find joy. Because in death and dying, we find Jesus. Jesus is found in death. That's the irony of this whole life. That Jesus is found in death to receive life, and life to the fullest. We first need to die. Because in order to survive this world, we first need to die to this world. Come soon, Lord Jesus. Amen.